The Elder Scrolls has over 30 vampire clans scattered across Tamriel, and they are absolutely not created equal. Some are scheming political powerhouses, some are literal armies, and some are just weird guys in a swamp keeping people in magical comas. Today I'm ranking every major clan from weakest to most powerful, and trust me, the gap between the bottom and the top is staggering. Starting with a clan that's more creepy than capable, Wet Fang. So somewhere deep in the swamps of Black Marsh, there's a vampire clan that decided hunting was too much effort. The Wet Fang use magicka to render their victims completely catatonic, basically putting people into magical comas so they can harvest their blood on a schedule. They even have a cute little name for it. They call it the Red Nectar, which is, not ideal for the people lying paralyzed in a swamp being used as juice boxes. Here's the thing about the Wet Fang. Their entire operation is built around maintaining helpless prey. They're not ambush predators. They're not warriors. They're not even particularly good mages in any combat sense. They're farmers. Blood farmers, sure, but farmers nonetheless. Their whole power structure depends on keeping victims locked in a controlled environment where nothing can go wrong. The second you take them out of that setup, they've got zero battlefield presence. Now, they do maintain active rivalries with vampire factions in Cyrodiil, which suggests at least some territorial ambition. But picking fights with your neighbors is very different from actually winning those fights, and nothing in the lore suggests the Wet Fang have ever dominated anything that wasn't already lying unconscious on the ground. Their methods are genuinely disturbing. Keeping sentient beings in permanent magical paralysis as living blood reserves is nightmare fuel, but horror doesn't equal strength. A serial killer with a basement full of victims is terrifying, but he's not exactly conquering nations. That's the Wet Fang. Maximum creep factor, minimum actual power. But if you think a clan of blood farmers is underwhelming, wait until you meet a group of vampires who turn stealth into an art form. Birni Clan. If the Birni Clan is hunting you, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. One of Morrowind's 3 great vampire clans, the Birni operate out of the Dwemer ruins of Galam Deus under the leadership of Raxley Birni, and they've built their entire identity around one thing. You will never see them coming. These vampires are described as far more attuned to the shadows than any other vampire clan in all of Tamriel. They don't just hide in darkness, they literally slide through it. They become completely invisible within shadow itself, which is a sentence that sounds like it belongs in a fantasy novel until you remember that's exactly what this is. Members of the Burn clan receive a plus 20 bonus to agility, sneak, unarmored, and hand-to-hand. Every single stat is built around one philosophy: get close, kill quietly, leave zero evidence. No heavy armor, no destruction magic, just hands, speed, and shadow. They're the assassin archetype cranked to its logical extreme. Their prey doesn't scream, their prey doesn't fight back, their prey simply vanishes, and nobody ever figures out the Birni were involved, which is, not ideal if you're the prey. Here's the thing though, being the perfect assassin is terrifying on an individual level. One burn vampire in a dark room is probably the scariest thing in Morrowind, but stealth doesn't win wars. It doesn't hold territory against a rival clan marching through your front door. When you've built your entire power structure around not being seen, you've also built in a ceiling. They lack the raw physical dominance and the magical depth to compete with the clans above them on this list. They're the best at what they do. The problem is what they do has limits. But if the Birni are the scalpel, the next clan is the Sledgehammer, Quarry Clan. Where the Birni clan hides in the shadows and picks you off without a sound, the Quarry clan kicks down your front door and beats you to death with it. These are the Bruisers of Vardenfell, the pure warrior vampires. Every member is selected and enhanced specifically for exceptional strength and martial combat, and nothing else. No magic tricks, no sneaking around, just centuries of accumulated I will hit you until you stop moving. The clan operates out of the Dwemer ruin of Druskashti under the leadership of Volrina Quarry, an imperial rogue classified as an ancient of the bloodline. That ancient title isn't decorative, it means she's been perfecting the art of killing things for longer than most civilizations have existed, and she built her entire clan around that same philosophy. You don't get recruited into the Quara because you're clever or because you can cast a decent fireball. You get recruited because you can rip someone apart in close quarters, and that's the only interview question. This makes them absolutely dominant in direct confrontation. In a straight fight, a Quara vampire is beating almost anything that walks up to it. The Birni clan's stealth advantage evaporates the second they're spotted, and against Quara, getting spotted means getting folded in half. It's not even a conversation, but here's the thing about raw muscle. It has a ceiling. The Quara represent 1/3 of Morrowind's vampire rock, paper, scissors triangle, and while they crush the stealth option, they're significantly more vulnerable to the magic option. A ranged spellcaster who keeps distance and throws destruction magic can exploit the Quara's lack of magical specialization in ways that no amount of bench pressing will fix. You can't punch a fireball. Well, you can, once. They're the strongest thing in any room that doesn't contain a competent competent mage, which is an impressive resume, but also a very specific weakness that the next clan on this list exploits perfectly. Unda'a clan. If the Quara are the muscle and the burn are the shadows, then the Undead are the ones who looked at both approaches and said that's cute, but have you tried bending reality? The Undead clan completes Morrowind's vampire trifecta, and they sit comfortably at the top of it. Because while strength and stealth both have hard ceilings, magic in the Elder Scrolls doesn't. It just keeps scaling. The Undead are described as being blessed with dark powers, with every member of the clan laser focused on mastery of the arcane. And they didn't just dabble, they built an entire infrastructure around it. While the Quara holed up in one set of Dwemer ruins and the Burn claimed another, the Undead spread across Vardenfell by occupying ancestral tombs. Plural. They turned the burial sites of Dunmer ancestors into a distributed network of magical outposts and research facilities, all connected back to their headquarters at Ashmalek Tomb. Basically, they built a university system for forbidden magic, and every campus was a crypt, which is, not ideal for the neighbors. Here's where it gets interesting, though. The Undead didn't just study the same magic everyone else was practicing, they dedicated themselves to forbidden magical traditions that other vampire bloodlines actively avoided. Let that sink in for a second. Vampires, creatures who are already considered abominations by most of Tamriel, looked at what the Undead were researching and said, no thanks, that's too far. Whatever they were learning in those tombs was dark enough to make the undead uncomfortable. I don't know what to tell you. For players in Morrowind, the Undead were the recommended clan for mage characters specifically because of their specialized magical affinities and their ability to teach sophisticated arcane techniques you couldn't get anywhere else. They weren't just powerful individually, they were producing more powerful vampires through education. That's the difference between a clan with a few strong members and a clan with a system designed to manufacture strength at scale. Strength fades, stealth gets countered, but a vampire clan sitting on centuries of accumulated arcane knowledge that nobody else will even touch. That's a force multiplier with no upper limit, but even the Undead's forbidden research looks quaint compared to a clan that decided vampires should be the good guys. Ravenwatch. Every clan we've covered so far has one thing in common. They're predators. They feed, they scheme, they conquer, and they don't lose a second of sleep over it. Ravenwatch is the exact opposite, and honestly, that's what makes them so hard to rank. Led by Verandis Ravenwatch, this clan earned the unofficial title of Tamriel's Friendly Vampires, which sounds like a children's book, but is actually pretty accurate. They control their vampiric urges, protect innocents, and actively work alongside mortal forces rather than treating them like a buffet. Verandis himself served as a central figure in ESO's Dark Heart of Skyrim storyline and the Greymoor expansion, guiding players through Blackreach and proving himself one of the most competent allies you could ask for. The guy is powerful, knowledgeable, and genuinely selfless, which for a vampire is basically a personality disorder. Here's the thing though, their magical and combat capabilities are legitimately impressive. Verandis alone demonstrates mastery over ancient vampiric magic that rivals anything the more ruthless clans bring to the table. His followers aren't slouches either. They hold their own against threats that would flatten most mortal organizations. On the paper, Ravenwatch has the raw ingredients to sit much higher on this list, but they won't use them. Not fully. Their self-imposed moral code is both their greatest asset and their most glaring weakness. Because they refuse to exploit mortals, they've built something no other vampire clan on this list has: trust. Alliances with mortal governments, cooperation with organizations that would stake any other vampire on sight, access to resources and intelligence networks that predatory clans could never dream of. That's genuinely powerful in a way that raw, destructive capability can't replicate. The problem is, when you're facing a clan that has zero ethical reservations about ripping your spine out, I choose not to fight at full strength is a tough position to defend. Ravenwatch sits at the midpoint of this ranking because they represent an unresolved question. Is a vampire who refuses to deploy their full destructive potential truly powerful, or are they just powerful in theory? Their restraint earns them allies. It also means they'll always be holding something back while their enemies hold nothing, which is noble. It's admirable. It's also exactly the kind of limitation that the next clan on this list would exploit without hesitation. Hollowfang clan. Most vampire clans look at the world and think, I want to drink that person's blood. The Hollowfang clan looked at a literal dragon and had the exact same thought, which is, ambitious. This is a Khajiit vampire clan operating out of northern Elsewhere, and everything about them feels like somebody took the standard vampire playbook and threw it in the trash. For starters, their religious devotion isn't pointed at Molag Bal like most vampire clans. Instead, the Holofang worship Sanguine, the Khajiit interpretation of Sanguine, the Daedric prince of revelry and hedonism. So right out of the gate, these are vampires who party. Their patron deity is basically the god of having a good time, which already sets them apart from every brooding castle-dwelling bloodline we've covered so far. But here's where it gets interesting. The Holofang aren't just hedonists with fangs, they're genuinely intelligent. The clan is known for an obsession with elaborate puzzles and complex ritual practices, suggesting a level of intellectual sophistication that most vampire clans never bother developing. They're not just hunting in the dark, they're solving things, building things, thinking several moves ahead, and then they decided to go after a dragon. The Holofang clan's most documented ambition was their attempt to consume the blood of a trapped dragon in order to absorb draconic supernatural power. Let that sink in for a second. A vampire clan, already enhanced by undeath and Daedric worship, decided that wasn't enough. They wanted dragon blood on top of everything else. The magical preparation required to even attempt something like that is staggering. You don't just walk up to a dragon with a goblet and ask nicely. You need containment rituals, binding magic, and enough raw combat capability to keep the thing restrained while you figure out how to drain it. The fact that they got as far as they did tells you everything about where this clan sits on the power scale. They're wildcards. The Khajiit cultural backbone gives them cunning and adaptability that more rigid clans completely lack, and their willingness to reach for power sources that other vampires wouldn't even consider makes them genuinely unpredictable. They're not the strongest clan on this list, but they might be the most creative. And in the vampire world, creativity with zero fear is a dangerous combination. But if you think fire-adjacent ambition is impressive, wait until you meet a clan that literally becomes fire. Korgari. Vampires are supposed to be creatures of cold, darkness, and death. That's the whole deal. They lurk in shadows, they drain warmth from the living, they recoil from sunlight. It's been the formula for centuries. So naturally, the Elder Scrolls looked at all of that and said, what if we made a clan that just quietly took over an entire region and nobody really noticed until it was too late? The Korgari are one of the lesser known vampire bloodlines from mainland Morrowind, and what makes them interesting isn't some flashy supernatural gimmick, it's their approach to expansion. While other vampire clans in Morrowind are busy being dramatic and territorial in predictable ways, the Korgari were methodically spreading their influence across the region, absorbing territory from rival clans with a patience that borders on unsettling. Here's where it gets genuinely absurd. We know almost nothing about them. That's it. That's the scary part. In a world where vampire clans like the Quara are out there flexing raw physical dominance and the Onderis are flaunting their mastery of magic, the Korgari are barely a footnote. A minor clan that expanded its reach, mentioned in passing, and then basically left to the imagination, which is, not ideal if you're someone trying to catalog every dangerous thing in Tamriel. How do you prepare for something the historical record can't even be bothered to detail, but the lack of information is exactly what makes them unnerving? Morrowind's three major vampire clans, the Quara, Onde, and Burnie, all have well-documented strengths, weaknesses, and territories. Players have fought them, joined them, studied them inside and out. The Korgari exist in the margins, a name on a list, a territory notation, the vampire equivalent of that neighbor who's always quiet until the police show up with a search warrant. The broader implication is what matters here. Morrowind has dozens of vampire bloodlines beyond the three you encounter in the game. The Korgari are proof that for every clan Bethesda fleshed out, there are others lurking in the lore with almost zero explanation. You're not getting a stat sheet, you're not getting a weakness chart, you're getting a name and the knowledge that they successfully expanded their territory, which means they were good at what they did. Whatever that was. Nobody talks about the Korgari because there's barely anything to talk about. And somehow that's worse than knowing everything, but if you think an obscure territorial clan is unsettling, the Nighthollow clan makes the Korgari look almost reasonable. Nighthollow. Most vampire clans earn their reputation through what they've done. The Nighthollow earn theirs through one thing they refuse to do: submit. Here's what we know for certain. The Nighthollow clan operates out of Hjalmarch, a fog-choked swamp region in northern Skyrim where visibility drops to zero and the ground swallows people whole. Not exactly a vacation destination, but for vampires who want to stay hidden and stay dangerous, it's perfect real estate. They've carved out a territory there and they've held it. That alone wouldn't be remarkable, except for one small detail. The Volkihar clan also lives in Skyrim. Let that sink in for a second. The Volkihar, the pureblood vampire lords with a direct line to Molag Bal, the faction led by Lord Harkon, who sacrificed thousands of innocents to a Daedric prince just to get his power upgrade. Those vampires vampires operate in the same province. And the Night Hollow looked at all of that and said, no thanks, we're good. They maintained complete independence, zero allegiance, zero tribute, zero bending the knee. That's not stubbornness. That's a power statement. Think about what independence actually requires in that scenario. You don't just politely decline a faction like the Volkihar. You need enough strength, enough territorial advantage, enough raw capability that absorbing you becomes more trouble than it's worth. The Volkihar didn't leave the Night Hollow alone out of kindness. Harkon doesn't do kindness. The Night Hollow survived because the cost of conquering them was too high. Now here's where it gets frustrating. The canonical documentation on the Night Hollow is thin. We don't have detailed breakdowns of their magical specialties, their leadership hierarchy, or their specific combat capabilities. What we have is the single most telling piece of evidence possible. They exist independently in a province dominated by arguably the strongest vampire clan in Elder Scrolls history, and nobody wiped them out. Sometimes the absence of information tells you more than pages of lore ever could. Whatever the Night Hollow have going on in those Hjalmarch swamps, it's enough to make even Harkon's court think twice. And in a world where Daedric blessed vampire lords treat most other undead factions like inconveniences, thinking twice is basically a compliment. But if a single independent clan impresses you, wait until you hear about an entire vampire army that split a province in half and forced an empress to respond personally. Grey Host. Every clan we've talked about so far has been exactly that, a clan. A group of vampires hiding in ruins, lurking in tombs, playing politics in the shadows. The Grey Host wasn't a clan, it was an army, and not just any army. A supernatural military force led by a Breton vampire named Styrichi, who history remembers as a tyrant king commanding what's described as a dreadful army consisting of batmen and wolves. Not vampires and their thralls, not a coven with a few guard dogs. Batmen and wolves fighting side by side in organized military formations, sweeping across the land and destroying everything in their path. Here's what separates the Grey Host from literally every other entry on this list. They didn't just feed on a region. They didn't just control a ruin or intimidate local population. They conquered territory. Styrichi's forces claimed all lands between Thorstad Place and Elenhir, which effectively split an entire province in half. A vampire-led army drew a line across the map and said, this is ours now, and for a time, nobody could do anything about it. Let that sink in. Most vampire clans are happy if they can maintain a single stronghold without getting raided by adventurers. The Grey Host held enough ground to bisect a province, and the composition of this force is what makes it truly terrifying. This wasn't a single species operation. Styrichi somehow unified vampires, werewolves, and other supernatural creatures under one banner, which is roughly the equivalent of getting cats and dogs to form a functioning government. Vampires and werewolves don't historically get along in Elder Scrolls lore. They serve different Daedric princes, have fundamentally different curses, and generally want to kill each other. But Styrichi looked at that situation and said, no, you're all working for me now. And apparently they did. The military threat got so severe that it drew the direct attention of the Empress herself. Not a local Jarl, not a regional governor, the Empress. When your vampire army is important enough to land on the desk of continental leadership, you've graduated from dangerous faction to existential problem. The Imperial response confirmed what everyone already knew. The Grey Host wasn't some backwater nuisance. They were a threat to the established order of Tamriel itself. But here's the thing about the Grey Host. Their power came from organization and scale, not from individual supernatural enhancement. Styrichi wasn't necessarily stronger than every other vampire lord on this list. His soldiers weren't individually more dangerous than a Volkihar pureblood. What made them devastating was the fact that they functioned as a true military force, coordinated, disciplined, and multi-species. That's a different kind of power entirely, and it almost worked. Almost. Because there's one clan that didn't need an army to be the most dangerous vampires in Tamriel, they just needed a deal with a god. Volkihar clan. Every clan on this list earned their spot. Some through magic, some through military force, some through sheer brutality. But the Volkihar don't belong in the same conversation as any of them. They operate on a completely different level, and the reason is simple. Their power doesn't come from training, territory, or tradition. It comes directly from a god. Lord Harkon, the head of the Volkihar clan and the main antagonist of Skyrim's Dawnguard expansion, didn't stumble into vampirism through a random bite or a cursed artifact. He went looking for it. Specifically, he sought out Molag Bal, the Daedric prince of domination and enslavement, one of the most feared entities in the entire Elder Scrolls universe. And to get Molag Bal's attention, Harkon sacrificed thousands of innocent people in ritual murder. Thousands. Not a handful, not a village. Thousands of lives, offered up like kindling to get a dark god to pick up the phone. And Molag Bal answered. In return for this ocean of blood, the Prince of Domination granted Harkon immortality and transformed his entire family into pure-blood vampires. Not got scratched by a feral vampire and a cave vampires. Purebloods, created through direct direct Daedric intervention, placing them in a supernatural hierarchy so far above normal vampires, it's almost a different species entirely. We're talking beings that approach demigod status, which is, a slight upgrade. Here's the thing that separates the Volkihar from literally everyone else on this list. They are the only clan confirmed to produce true vampire lords. That transformation you see in Dawnguard, where Harkon turns into a massive winged nightmare that floats above the battlefield, raining down destruction that isn't some generic vampire ability. It's exclusive to this bloodline. No other clan can replicate it because no other clan has a direct covenant with a Daedric prince backing their power. The Vampire Lord form is the single most iconic vampire ability in the entire Elder Scrolls franchise, and it belongs to the Volkihar alone. But what really defines this clan isn't just the power itself, it's the philosophy behind it. Harkon didn't just sacrifice strangers. He sacrificed his own family's humanity, his relationship with his wife Valerica, his connection to his daughter Serena. Everything that made him mortal, he fed into the fire to get what he wanted. There is no line the Volkihar will not cross. That willingness to burn everything down for power isn't a weakness in their eyes. It's the entire point, and that's what makes them untouchable. The Quara have strength, the Ondi have magic, the Grey Host had an army, but none of them had a god in their corner, handing out demigod transformations like party favors. The Volkihar aren't just the strongest vampire clan in the Elder Scrolls. They're arguably one of the most powerful factions of any kind in the entire franchise. When you look at this full ranking from the Wetfang all the way up to here, a pattern becomes pretty clear. The clans at the bottom relied on stealth or brute force or regional magic. The clans in the middle combined those things in clever ways. But the clan at the top, they skipped all of that. Because in the Elder Scrolls, the ultimate path to vampire supremacy was never strength, stealth, magic, or military might. It was a deal with a god. And Harkon made the best one anyone's ever seen. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.